I'd like to welcome you to BMORENEWS.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. We're here at the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce, the one and only Ron Busby. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Why did we form a U.S. Black Chamber?
That's a great question. It's one that's been posed to me quite a bit over the last couple of years. Uh, I will give you the candid answer, then I'll give you really the politically correct answer. The candid answer is that there was just a lack of our voice being heard here in Washington, D.C., as well as the rest of the country. The politically correct answer is that the Washington establishment, as well as White House, was looking for an African American business voice to be heard during this new administration in reference to legislation, in reference to bills, as reference to funding to try to get the economy back on a solid ground. And where better to look than the African American business owners that have, if you look at over the last few years, we've had the one area of growth in this economy. African American businesses have actually grown over 30%, which is huge for our economy. But there's also another side to that story as well that hopefully we can get into a little bit later on in this conversation.
Okay, well, how are things going thus far? Are we getting buy-in from around the country, presumably from the black chambers around the country?
We are. It's a great time. It's exciting times. Our message is being heard. It's being received positively across the country. We started in late 2009 as a concept from black chambers that were concerned about the voice that was being articulated on our behalves here in Washington, D.C. And in a short period of time, actually in less than 18 months, we've taken on the majority of the black chambers across the country. There's roughly about 110 black chambers nationally, and we represent about 80 to 85 of those chambers currently. We stand on 5 pillars that have really allowed us to have a positive influence in reference to black chambers, as a reference to black business owners, in reference to politicians, the educational, as well as the clergy. Those 5 pillars consisting of advocacy. We actually are, although we're not a lobbying firm, we have been at the table here in Washington, D.C., making sure that our voice is being heard. The one thing that I noticed when I first moved to Washington, D.C. is that everyone had a lobbying arm. We are in our offices currently, and you'll notice that we're right next door to the SBA. We actually share some space with WIP, which is Women Impacting Public Policy, which is the largest women lobbying firm. If you've noticed, right across the hall from us is the Sugar Beets Growers Manufacturers. Everyone has someone representing them here in Washington, D.C., except for black businesses.
When is that going to change?
It has already changed.
Good.
The United States Black Chamber of Commerce is now the voice that's at that table advocating on behalf of black business owners.
So you are at the table with the president?
Currently, we are. We are representing, and maybe not necessarily with the president, let me clarify that, but his agencies from the SBA to the National Minority Supplier Development Council, to the 7 arms, 7 agencies and departments. We are all have a great relationship with them in reference to the needs and the concerns of African American business owners.
Now, in order to head an entity such as the U.S. Black Chamber, it always helps if the person in charge, that is you, knows a little something about business. Do you know anything about business? You ever run a business?
Well, that's a good question, and I think it's a valid question because at this juncture where we are, the United States, in reference to African Americans, we have been led and our voice has been heard by some great leaders that have followed, that I follow behind. But typically they come from social issues, from justice issues, as well as from a clergy standpoint, but not really representing business owners. We've had folks from the Urban League, from the NAACPs to the National Action Network representing business owners. In this case, for the first time, the United States Black Chamber of Commerce is headed by myself, Ron Busby, who has extensive corporate experience from IBM, Xerox, as a vice president, Coca-Cola Fountain Sales Division. As an entrepreneur, I was in the entrepreneurial industry for 10 years, where I personally ran a family business that took over from my dad, so we were second generation African American firm.
So you had 10, 20 employees?
Grew the firm from our initial 7 employees to over 700 employees in a matter of 9 years. Grew our annualized revenue from $150,000 a year to over $15 million. We were the largest at the time black-owned janitorial firm in the country. As well as corporate experience, entrepreneurial experience, I also have chamber experience where I ran the Greater Phoenix Black Chamber of Commerce. Started off as just a small business member, got involved in various committees, had the opportunity to get on the board of directors, became the chairman of the board, and then moved from the board of directors to becoming its president and CEO, where I took our organization from a relatively unknown entity to one of the nation's largest and most prominent black chambers in the country.
Now, you've recently met with some of your chamber presidents over the past month or so?
I have. Over the last 12 months, I've had the opportunity to go across the country and meet with black chamber presidents, boards of directors, some new, some existing chambers, and have been welcomed. And it's an amazing story that I have heard across the country in reference to the successes as well as the opportunities that black chambers have had and will have in these next coming years in reference to developing our black businesses across the country.
What is the message that you share with the chamber, member chamber organizations?
Sure. I think part of the message that we're telling folks is that for the first time, a lot of us voted, and we voted successfully. We got together as a country, as a community, and put in leadership that looked like us, that understood our concerns. The issue is that there's a huge disconnect between what happens here in Washington, D.C., as well as around the country. The message needs to make sure that it gets to the local communities, to the local chamber presidents, so that they can implement the programs that are being developed here in Washington, D.C. The one thing that I found when I got here is that the president has an African American agenda. There was a 21-page document that when I first got here, I had the privy to review in a briefing, and it touched on everything from education, from an elementary standpoint, to graduate school, to HBCUs, to small business owners, to health, to housing, all dealing with African Americans' concerns. The issue is we need to make sure that that message is being delivered in our communities and making sure that our communities are taking advantage of the programs that are being worked upon here in the White House.
So when I get back to Baltimore, what should I share with the members of the Greater Baltimore Black Chamber, or even from a larger standpoint, what can business owners and black chambers across the country who don't know about the U.S. Black Chamber or Ron Busby or the message, what can the people do? What should the people do?
Well, that's a good thing. Good question. I think the first thing is to get involved, get engaged. If you look at our website, www.usbci.org, again, www.usbci.org, you'll be able to find out a great deal of information about the United States Black Chamber. But let me say this. We really have the 5 pillars. I talked about the first one, which is advocacy. The second one is access to capital. Third one being contracting opportunities, and not just contracts in reference to opportunities that are happening in 2011 or 2012, but really where do we need to be going in 2013 and 14. So gearing ourselves now for the opportunities that are coming down. If that's solar, if that's high-speed rail, if that's alternative energies, those are the types of opportunities that the U.S. Black Chamber is developing to make sure that we're on the leading edge. Next is education. We partner with the University of Phoenix to make sure that black firms have geared information specifically for black entrepreneurs. I'm a graduate of an HBCU, actually 2 HBCUs, Florida A&M and Clark Atlanta University. But the fact of the matter is...
You said Morehouse?
Morehouse, Clark Atlanta University. But the fact of the matter is more African Americans graduated from the University of Phoenix than all the HBCUs combined. So when we were looking at developing an education program, we said, well, we need to make sure that our program is accessible by African Americans, so we partnered with the University of Phoenix. And lastly is chamber development. We feel like we are going to only be as strong as the weakest link. So we want to make sure that all of our chambers have the resources, skills, and tools that they need to be able to be successful. The last thing we want to do is to have and develop programs that can't be implemented because our chambers don't have the resources to be able to roll them out. So those are the areas that we're focusing. What I would do if I go back to Baltimore as well as the rest of the country is tell folks to get engaged, to find a way in which they can get involved in their local communities, to give back to their local black chambers of commerce, and more importantly, join the U.S. Black Chamber.
Okay, one final question. You might not have been expecting this, but since you are a veteran business owner and you know something about managing hundreds of employees, what's the business tip of the day?
The business tip of the day: work on your business versus working in your business. So often we get caught up in the day-to-day grind that we can't see the long-term visions. I would tell folks to make sure that they concentrate on the big picture, and sometimes even though you get caught up in the day-to-day activities, make sure you're focusing on the things that you're going to need to be successful long-term.
Good deal. Thank you for your time.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Ron Busby, the Executive Director of the U.S. Black Chamber of Commerce. Keep watching BMORENEWS.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth.